My name's Cole. I'm 29, a software engineer by trade, and an extremely reluctant participant in family reunions. Not because I hate my family exactly. It's more complicated than that. Growing up, I was the sensitive one. That's what my mom used to call me when I cried after being left out. When my sister, Natalie, got a brand new piano and private lessons while I was handed a dusty secondhand guitar and told to be creative, I remember choking back tears and being told, "Cole, not everything's about you." But it was never about me, was it? Natalie is 2 years younger than me, blonde, charming, and frankly brilliant at playing people like a violin. She was the kind of girl who'd break a vase, cry before anyone could accuse her, and have me grounded for it. My parents never saw it. Or maybe they did and didn't care. Either way, growing up with Natalie was like being cast as the extra in a movie about her life. I wasn't the villain or the sidekick. I was just there. Invisible. Only noticed when I messed something up. I was 7 when I noticed the difference for the first time. It was Christmas morning, and I had begged for a Lego space station set. I got socks. Natalie got a Barbie dream house and a matching pink scooter. She was 5. I remember thinking maybe Santa just forgot me. I actually asked my mom if I'd been bad that year. She didn't answer. She just said, "Well, Natalie's younger. She believes in the magic. Don't ruin that for her." That was the beginning of a pattern that never stopped. Summer vacation? She got art camp in France. I got 2 weeks at Uncle Larry's house watching his dog while he was in Vegas. When she turned 16, they gifted her a used BMW. When I turned 16, I got a lecture on building character through work and was handed a mop at my dad's friend's hardware store. Still, I tried not to let it define me. I buried myself in books, taught myself to code off free YouTube tutorials, and saved for a cheap laptop by fixing broken bikes around the neighborhood. My parents didn't really ask what I was doing. They just assumed I was glued to screens again. But screens were my sanctuary. Somewhere in that lonely little world of error codes and late-night forum posts, I found clarity, solace, control. By the time I hit college, I'd already built 2 simple apps that made a few $100 a month in ad revenue. Nothing life-changing, but enough for groceries and the occasional greasy pizza after midnight coding marathons. Meanwhile, Natalie was in her first year at NYU, majoring in media psychology. Don't ask me what that is. I don't think she ever knew either. Posting avocado toast photos and shopping for fall fashion in Soho on weekends, courtesy of our parents' emergency credit card. She called me once to complain her roommate was annoying. I was in the middle of debugging a crash that could have lost my freelance client thousands. I told her I was busy. She cried, told mom, and I got a passive-aggressive email asking why I can't be more supportive of my sister when she's clearly having a tough time adjusting. Still, I kept my head down, kept building, kept improving. I didn't show off, didn't post flashy Instagram updates, didn't brag at family dinners. I didn't want to start a war. My therapist calls it peacekeeping. I call it survival. My parents didn't come to my college graduation. Natalie had a very important networking brunch the same weekend. Apparently, she cried when she thought she might miss it. So, mom and dad flew to New York to support her. I got a card in the mail. No cash. Just, "We're proud of you. Let's celebrate soon." We never did. After college, things got worse. Not for me. Ironically, that's when my life really started. I landed a remote job at a mid-sized tech firm. Started consulting on the side. Built a reputation quietly. Kept my face out of things. By 26, I'd launched my own software platform and gotten my first angel investor. By 27, we were doing $2 million in revenue. Now, at 29, we're valued at $10 million. I own the majority stake. No press. No interviews. Just quiet domination from a rented apartment above a coffee shop where nobody knew my last name. My parents still thought I worked in IT. They told people I fixed computers and that Cole's into all that techie stuff. Natalie? She was a consultant now, which meant she had an Instagram account and a few sponsors for hair vitamins and energy drinks. She'd call me sometimes for career advice, but really, it was just to vent about how her brand engagement was down or how her new condo's lighting made her look pale on camera. Oh right, they bought her a condo. At 22. For $100,000. Downtown. Furnished. Paid in full. When I asked, just once, out of curiosity, why they didn't help me out with rent when I was sleeping on a friend's futon after my internship, my dad looked confused and said, "You never asked." That stung. But again, I let it go. I always let it go. Then came the retirement party. Dad was stepping down from his company. He was a regional director at some manufacturing firm, and they were throwing him a big event. Classy venue, 3-course meal, extended family invited. I wasn't planning to go, but Mom insisted. Said it was important to your father, and everyone's going to be there. Which, in our family, meant mostly people who hadn't seen me since I was 12 and still thought I had asthma and a lisp. I went. Wore a navy suit I hadn't pulled out in years. Polished my shoes. Practiced smiling in the mirror. The venue was nicer than I expected. Chandeliers, cocktail bar, jazz trio playing softly in the background. People buzzed around like bees in a hive. Natalie was there early, of course, already taking selfies in the garden courtyard. She wore a champagne-colored dress that probably cost more than my first car. "Cole," she squealed when she saw me, as if I was some lost puppy. "You look so grown up." "I'm 29, Nat," I said, trying to keep it light. "Right?" She laughed, looping her arm through mine. "Isn't it crazy how fast time goes?" She introduced me to her influencer friends, 2 girls with perfect makeup and a guy named Skylar who wore sunglasses indoors. I smiled politely. They asked what I did. Before I could answer, Natalie chimed in with, "Oh, Cole's like, in computers or something. He fixes stuff." That again. I opened my mouth to correct her, but something in my chest locked up. Not because I was ashamed, but because, why bother? What was the point? They weren't listening. They never had. The night went on. Speeches were made. Toasts raised. My dad looked genuinely happy, and for a second, I was glad I came. Then someone, I think it was my cousin Leah, asked what I was up to these days. I smiled. "Still running my company. We've grown a lot." "Oh cool," she said. "Like a startup?" "Yeah. Tech-focused. Mostly automation software. We just crossed 8 figures in valuation." The table went quiet for a second. Natalie blinked. "Wait, what?" I shrugged. "Yeah, we're doing pretty well." She frowned. "You're lying." I turned toward her. "Why would I lie?" "Because you're not, like, that kind of person." That stung more than I expected. I wasn't sure what she meant, but I had a feeling she meant everything I feared. Not charismatic enough, not bold enough, not special enough. Not her. Actually, a voice piped up from behind me. He's not lying. It was my Aunt Marie, my mom's younger sister. She was holding her phone and a folded piece of newspaper. She looked smug. "I meant to bring this earlier," she said, handing the paper to my dad. "Thought you'd want to see what your IT guy son's been up to." My heart dropped. I hadn't done any press. We'd agreed to stay lean, low profile, silent partners only. But a few weeks ago, one of our clients gave a glowing interview and mentioned us by name. Apparently, some local business paper picked it up. I watched as my dad unfolded the clipping and read the headline. Then Natalie snatched it from his hands, skimmed it, and turned red. "You didn't tell us?" she hissed. "You let me introduce you to Skylar like you were some computer nerd?" I stared at her. "I am a computer nerd." "No," she snapped. "You're a liar." The room had gone dead silent. My mom's expression was unreadable. My dad looked like he'd just realized the earth was flat. And that's when my aunt said something that flipped everything upside down. "You know what's funny?" she said, sipping her wine. "Cole never bragged, never asked for anything. Never even mentioned he was the CEO of a company worth $10 million. Meanwhile, you guys were busy buying Natalie condos and calling him too sensitive. That was the moment everything shifted. And that was just the beginning." You could hear a pin drop after Aunt Marie's little mic drop moment. The silence felt thick, like everyone at the table was suddenly reevaluating everything they thought they knew about me. I didn't say anything. I just sat there, letting them marinate in the truth for once. No interruptions. No jokes to smooth it over. Just the cold, undeniable reality that their quiet, sensitive, IT-fixing Cole had been building an empire while they were too busy uploading Natalie's brunch pics and cheering her on for landing another teeth-whitening brand deal. I didn't mean for it to come out like that. I wasn't trying to rub anything in anyone's face. Honestly, if Aunt Marie hadn't brought that newspaper clipping, I probably would have left that party unnoticed, as usual, slipping out the side door before dessert. But something changed that night. Not in me. I'd already done the work to find my peace, but in them. For the first time in my entire life, I wasn't the afterthought. And Natalie hated that. She stormed off before the cake was even cut, dragging her purse behind her like a wounded animal. Skylar and her other influencer friends awkwardly followed, murmuring something about traffic and lighting. My mom gave me a tight-lipped smile, and my dad just stared at the clipping like it was written in a foreign language. I didn't stick around much longer. I thanked Aunt Marie, gave a nod to a few stunned relatives, and went home. But that wasn't the end of it. Not even close. The text started the next morning. Mom, can we talk later today? Your sister's very upset. Dad, you blindsided us. I don't understand why you kept this from your family. Natalie, you think you're so clever. Running your little secret company behind our backs? Pathetic. That last one made me laugh. Secret company? What did she think I was doing all this time, selling Wi-Fi passwords on the dark web? I ignored the messages for a couple of days. I needed space. And honestly, I figured they'd cool off. But I underestimated just how much Natalie hated not being the center of attention. She showed up at my place 3 days later. Now, you have to understand, I live in a small loft above a coffee shop in the Arts District. It's cozy, minimalist. I like it, but it's not flashy. No doorman, no valet, just a keypad and a creaky stairwell that smells like espresso and old paint. So when I heard someone aggressively banging on the glass downstairs while I was on a Zoom call with my dev team, I muted myself and peeked out the window. And there she was, full glam, designer heels, furious expression, pounding on the door like I'd stolen her dog. I buzzed her in reluctantly. She didn't wait for me to say a word, just marched up the stairs, tossed her purse on my table, and started in. You humiliated me, Cole. I raised an eyebrow. Nice to see you too. Don't do that. Don't pretend like you didn't orchestrate that whole thing. You let me introduce you like a loser in front of my friends. You sat there smugly while Aunt Marie made me look like a narcissistic brat. I folded my arms. You didn't need any help looking like that. Wrong thing to say? Her face twisted. I've always supported you, she said, her voice rising. I've always tried to include you, even when you didn't fit in. Even when you were weird or awkward, or just, you. Wow. Thanks for that glowing endorsement. You know what I mean, she snapped. You could have told us. You could have at least warned me before letting me embarrass myself. I stared at her. This was surreal. Not once did she stop to ask how I'd gotten here. Not once did she ask about my business, my journey, my struggles. It was all about her. Her image. Her feelings. Her embarrassment. I didn't tell you because I knew this is exactly how you'd react, I said calmly. You'd make it about you. She scoffed. You really think you're better than me now, don't you? No, I said quietly. But I don't think you're better than me anymore. That's the difference. That shut her up. For a second, she grabbed her purse, muttered something under her breath, and stormed out. 2 hours later, I got a call from my mom. Cole, she began, with that tone that always made me feel like I was 5 and in trouble for something I didn't do. Your sister came to see you. She's very upset. She's always upset, I said flatly. She's just emotional. You know how she is. But this whole thing has really thrown her off. You should have told us. Why? I asked. So you could shrug and say, that's nice, honey, before asking how Natalie's new podcast is going. She didn't respond. I didn't tell you because I learned not to expect anything from you. I continued. You made it pretty clear growing up who the priority was. That's not fair, isn't it? There was a long silence on the line. Then, your father and I worked hard to support both of you. No, I said. You worked hard to support her. I supported myself. I hung up. That conversation left a pit in my stomach for days. Not because I regretted what I said. I didn't. But because it confirmed something I'd always suspected but never admitted. I was the backup plan. The emotional sponge. The fallback. And somewhere deep down, I think I'd hoped one day they'd look at me and finally see me. That hope was gone now. But the real betrayal? That came a week later. It started with a phone call from my CFO. We'll call her Janet. She's sharp, no nonsense, and not easily rattled. But she sounded shaken. Cole, she said, we have a situation. Apparently, someone had emailed one of our partners using a spoof version of my company email. The message contained a fake invoice and instructions to wire a large sum to a new account. Luckily, the partner flagged it and called us before sending anything. But the message was convincing. Personal. It referenced real details that only someone close to me would know. We did an internal trace. It didn't come from inside the company. The IP was masked, but not well. Janet's guy traced it to an apartment complex downtown. Natalie's condo. I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. At first, I didn't want to believe it. I told myself it could be a coincidence. Maybe someone in her building. Maybe she was hacked. But the more we dug, the more connections we found. Old emails she'd sent me with similar phrasing, photos she'd taken of my laptop when I wasn't paying attention, little breadcrumbs that pointed in one very ugly direction. I didn't tell my parents. Not yet. I wasn't ready. Instead, I went to see her. She opened the door wearing a silk robe, holding a smoothie, clearly surprised to see me. "Cole, what?" I held up my phone. "We need to talk. Now." And I swear, the way her expression shifted, just for a second, told me everything. Guilt, panic, then defiance. She let me in. "I know what you did," I said. "The fake invoice. The spoofed email. We traced it." She didn't deny it. Instead, she set her smoothie down and said, "You made me look like a joke in front of our entire family." I blinked. "So you tried to rob me? You humiliated me," she yelled. "I've been the one carrying this family's image for years. I'm the one they talk about. I'm the one they count on. And you just, what? Show up out of nowhere like some genius CEO and act like you're better than us." "I never said that." "You didn't have to," she snapped. "They all saw it. Aunt Marie, Uncle Doug, even Dad. For the first time in your life, you were the favorite. And you know what? You loved it." I was stunned. I wasn't even angry. Just tired. "You're right," I said finally. "For one night, I did love it. Not because I wanted to be the favorite, but because I wanted to matter." That shut her up. I turned to leave, but paused at the door. "I'm not pressing charges," I said quietly. "But you're cut off. Don't call me. Don't ask for favors. Whatever relationship we had, it's done." She didn't respond, just stared at me like I'd slapped her. And I walked out. That was the moment everything changed. And trust me, the fallout was just beginning. After I walked out of Natalie's condo, something in me cracked, but not in the way you might think. It wasn't rage. It wasn't heartbreak. It was something quieter, something duller. It was like a door I had been holding open for 29 years finally creaked shut. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I had to keep propping it open just in case they finally looked through it and saw me standing there. But even though I said I was done, part of me still hoped for some acknowledgement. An apology. A moment of clarity from my parents, where they might call and say, "We're sorry we didn't listen. We're sorry we didn't believe in you." But the call never came. Instead, I got silence. Well, except from Natalie. She posted a vague Instagram story 2 days later. A black screen with white text that said, "Betrayal is worse when it comes from someone who pretended to love you." Tag no one. But let's not kid ourselves. It didn't need to be tagged. She knew exactly what she was doing. The comments poured in. Her followers went into full poor baby mode. People were guessing wildly. A cheating boyfriend? A backstabbing best friend? Someone even wrote, "Whoever did this to you doesn't deserve you. Cut them off, queen." That one stung, because I had cut her off. And suddenly, I was the villain in her story. But the worst part wasn't the social media nonsense. It was what came next. A week later, I got a call from my dad. Not a warm one. Not a fatherly, let's talk kind of call. Just cold and clipped. "I heard about what happened with Natalie," he said. "From her or from someone who wasn't trying to manipulate you?" I asked. There was a long pause. "I don't know what's going on between you two," he said finally. "But she's family. And she's hurting." I almost laughed. "So I should just what? Forget that she tried to steal from me? Lie to my business partners? Ruin my company?" "She made a mistake," he said. "No," I snapped. "A mistake is spilling coffee on a client's shirt. A mistake is showing up late. She orchestrated fraud." Another pause. "I just don't want the family to fall apart," he said, quieter this time. "Not over this." That's when I realized how deep it went. My dad, this man who had always prided himself on structure, discipline, consequences, was ready to look past what Natalie did just to keep the peace. Or, more likely, to preserve her image. Because in our family, Natalie wasn't just a daughter. She was the sun. Everything else orbited around her. That night, I sat in the dark, staring at my ceiling, and felt it hit me all at once. This wasn't just about Natalie anymore. This was about a lifetime of being the runner-up. The shadow. The fallback plan. I thought I'd come to terms with that years ago. But it turns out, some wounds just bury themselves deeper. You think you're healed until something rips the stitches open. And I bled. Quietly. Privately. I stopped eating well. Stopped sleeping. Missed 2 team meetings. Janet called and asked if I was okay, and I gave her the classic lie. Just a bit burnt out. I'll bounce back soon. But I didn't bounce back. I spiraled. For the first time in years, I felt powerless. Natalie had always had power over our family, over me. And even now, when she was the one who crossed the line, she still got to be the one comforted, the one believed, the one defended. I didn't want revenge. Not yet. I just wanted to disappear. So I did. I booked a last-minute flight to Oregon, where my college roommate, Dylan, lived with his husband. They'd invited me dozens of times over the years. Come stay for a week. Get out of the grind. Unplug. I'd always said no, too busy. This time, I said yes. When I arrived, Dylan didn't ask questions. Just handed me a beer, pointed to the couch, and said, "We've got the office queued up and too much Thai food. Your room's upstairs when you're ready to crash." I stayed for 10 days. We hiked. We grilled burgers. We watched bad movies and made dumb jokes, and, eventually, I started sleeping through the night again. One evening, Dylan and I were sitting by the fire pit, and I finally told him everything. About Natalie, the company, the fake invoice, the way my parents responded. He didn't say much at first. Just let me talk. Then he leaned back in his chair, stared up at the stars, and said, "You know what your problem is?" I raised an eyebrow. "Do tell. You're still waiting for them to clap for you." That hit like a brick. "Dude," he continued, "you've already built something amazing. You made it. Not because of them. In spite of them. And now you're stuck waiting for the people who never showed up to suddenly realize they missed the show." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Because he was right. That night, I opened my laptop for the first time in days. Not to check emails. Not to update our roadmap. But just to write. Not code. Just thoughts. I wrote about being the forgotten kid. About growing up with a sister who sparkled and a family who only saw the glitter. About what it felt like to realize you were only ever loved for your silence. And I kept writing. It turned into a long post. Not angry. Not bitter. Just honest. I didn't name names. Didn't mention my company. Just talked about growing up in someone else's spotlight and learning to find your own glow in the shadows. On a whim, I posted it on a small Medium blog I used back in college. I figured maybe a few people would read it. Maybe not. By morning, it had 25,000 views. By the end of the week, 200,000. People started sharing their own stories in the comments. Siblings who were always second best. Daughters labeled too dramatic, while their brothers got a free pass. Sons like me, who learned to live quietly because their voice never mattered. It went viral. Somewhere along the way, a tech journalist picked it up. Wrote a piece titled "The Quiet Founders: What We Miss When We Only Celebrate the Loud." They linked to my company, finally naming it. And just like that, the phone started ringing. Investors. Partners. Even a university that wanted me to guest lecture. It was overwhelming, but for the first time, I didn't feel like I was pretending to be someone else. I wasn't Cole the backup. I was just Cole, the guy who built something real. Back in the office, Janet was grinning when I returned. "You broke our traffic records," she said, holding up her tablet. "From a blog post?" I asked. "From you. We updated the website. Added a letter from the founders section. My story, my words, my voice. And something changed in our company culture. People felt more connected. Like we weren't just building software. We were building something human." Meanwhile, my parents? Still silent. Until a letter showed up in the mail. Handwritten. Thick envelope. My name on the front in Mom's cursive. Inside was a 3-page letter. Apologizing. Rambling, really. Talking about how they never realized how much I'd grown. How they thought they were doing the right thing by supporting Natalie because she needed it more. How they assumed I was fine because I didn't complain. They said they were proud of me. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just folded the letter and put it in my desk drawer. Because even though it was what I had wanted for so long, I realized it wasn't enough. Words are easy. What came next? That would show me whether they truly meant it. I kept my parents' letter in the bottom drawer of my desk for weeks without reading it again. Not because I was afraid of what it said. I'd memorized every word after the 3rd read. But because I didn't want to start believing it too soon. People say they're sorry all the time. Usually when they're afraid of losing something. And I'd spent most of my life losing their approval, piece by piece. I wasn't about to let a few neatly written paragraphs win me back. Not without actions to match. The truth is, something changed in me after Oregon. After Dylan. After the blog post. I stopped hoping to be seen and started planning how I wanted to move forward. Not just with my family, but with my story, my narrative. For once, I was in control of how this all played out. And the timing? Couldn't have been more poetic. About a month after I got back, I received a curious email from my mom. No greeting, no emotional fluff. Just a simple subject line. Dad's retirement celebration, part 2. Turns out the original retirement party wasn't enough of a send-off for my father. His old company had decided to host a larger, more public event at a local country club. One of those places with valet parking, champagne towers, and waiters who looked like they were trained at Buckingham Palace. This one was open to industry partners, clients, and a lot of influential people from my hometown. And I knew immediately that was my stage. My first instinct was to say no. Why should I go? Why should I smile and nod for the same people who thought I was a recluse or a disappointment? But that instinct faded quickly. Because this time, I didn't feel like a background character. I wasn't going to sit at the kids' table with lukewarm chicken while everyone asked Natalie about her brand partnerships. I had a plan. It started with a phone call. "Janet," I said the next morning, "how do you feel about sponsoring a tech grant for local high school students?" She laughed. "That came out of nowhere." "What?" "I've got an idea." We moved fast. Within 2 weeks, our company launched a $50,000 innovation grant for underprivileged teens who wanted to learn coding or engineering but didn't have the resources. We partnered with a local nonprofit, hired a small PR firm, and started prepping a full press release. And I timed the announcement, very deliberately, for the day before my father's gala. Now, before you think this was all about revenge, let me be clear. I wanted to help those kids. I meant every dollar of that grant. But I also wanted my name to be the one people saw in the headlines that morning. I wanted to walk into that ballroom and not have to introduce myself. I wanted them to know who I was. The day before the event, a small piece ran in the Daily Business Journal. The headline read, "Local CEO launches grant to empower next generation of tech innovators." And the subheadline, "Qley Merritt, founder of Modulus Systems, gives back to his hometown with $50,000 initiative." Simple, clean, no drama, just truth. I forwarded the link to Aunt Marie. She responded 5 minutes later. "Now that's the Qley I always saw. Proud of you, kid." The next day, I put on the same navy suit I'd worn to the original retirement party, added a subtle tie clip, and slipped a copy of the newspaper into my inner jacket pocket, just in case. As I pulled into the country club parking lot, I felt oddly calm. Not angry, not nervous, just focused, like everything was finally aligned. The valet took my keys, I adjusted my cufflinks, and walked through the arched doorway like I belonged there. Because this time I did. The ballroom was packed, round tables with white linens, gold accents, people in expensive shoes sipping champagne like it was Gatorade. I saw familiar faces from old family barbecues and neighborhood block parties. But I also saw strangers, business owners, community leaders, a few journalists. And then, of course, I saw them. My parents. They stood near the center, Dad shaking hands like a politician, Mom beaming beside him. Natalie was there too, wearing a red dress that probably had its own insurance policy. She glanced up and spotted me, expression unreadable. Not a smile, not a glare, just still. I walked toward them slowly. "Qley," my father said first, blinking like he wasn't quite sure I was real. "Didn't expect to see you tonight." "I was invited," I said simply. He cleared his throat. "Right. Of course. I'm glad you're here." Natalie didn't say a word. She just sipped her drink and looked away. My mom tried. "How have you been?" she asked. I nodded. "Busy. We've been working on a new community initiative." "Oh," she asked, suddenly interested. "What kind?" Before I could answer, a voice behind me chimed in. "You're Qley Merritt, right? The Modulus guy?" I turned to see a man in his 50s, silver hair, sharp suit, clearly someone important. He extended a hand. "I'm Keith Wallace," he said. "My nephew just applied for your grant. Brilliant move, by the way. This town needs more programs like that." "Thank you," I said, shaking his hand. "We're excited about it." He clapped me on the shoulder, glanced at my father, and smiled. "You've raised quite a son." My dad nodded, lips pressed tight. "Yes, we're very proud." That was the moment I realized something vital. Pride, when forced, is hollow. But I didn't need it anymore. More people came up. A few reporters. One asked if I had a minute to answer a question about Modulus' recent AI project. Another wanted a photo. A photo. Me, the invisible kid, being asked for a picture at my father's event. Natalie's face tightened with every interaction. At one point, I caught her standing alone near the open bar. I walked over. "Congratulations," she said without looking at me. "Thanks," I replied. She finally turned, eyes sharp. "I guess this is your revenge." I shook my head. "No, this is my beginning." She didn't answer. She just watched as another person came up and asked me for a business card. And then the moment I'd been waiting for happened. One of the event organizers tapped a spoon against a glass and asked everyone to take their seats for dinner. My dad was being honored with a speech, and the MC invited the family to sit at the head table. To my surprise, they'd left a seat for me. Not at the end, not squeezed in, right next to my father. I took it. The speech started with the usual accolades, years of service, company growth, yada yada. But then the speaker said something that nearly made me choke on my water. And of course, we can't talk about Mr. Merritt's legacy without acknowledging his remarkable children. Natalie Merritt, rising entrepreneur and brand strategist. The applause was polite. And his son, Cole Merritt, founder of Modulus Systems and the visionary behind this week's community tech grant. We're proud to have him here tonight. The applause was louder. And just like that, the spotlight shifted. It wasn't revenge. Not yet. But it was a taste. And in that moment, I saw everything clearly. Who they were, who I was, and how far I'd come without needing them to carry me. But I also saw something else. An opportunity. Because my dad's company? Well, let's just say I knew things. Things they never thought I paid attention to. Connections. Vulnerabilities. Quiet inefficiencies he never fixed. And thanks to a few well-timed conversations with some of his former colleagues, I had a new idea, one that might change everything. It wasn't petty. It was strategic. And it was already in motion. The night of the gala marked the first time my father looked at me like an equal. Not as the quiet, awkward backup plan or the kid who never needed anything, but as someone with power, influence, leverage. But here's the thing about being treated like you don't matter for nearly 3 decades. You learn to pay attention. You learn to notice patterns, details, weaknesses. I left that night with more than applause and a seat at the head table. I left with conversations, names, an overheard remark between 2 former executives about how the merger paperwork still hadn't gone through. A whispered joke from a vendor about those outdated security protocols my dad's company refused to update. Sloppy, negligent, vulnerable, and I knew exactly what to do with it. The day after the event, I took a walk through the Modulus Systems office, passing by my dev team in our downtown workspace. The walls were glass, clean, transparent, just how I like my company. I paused outside the strategy room, looked in at Janet, and knocked. She opened the door. "You've got that face again." "What face?" "The face you had when you rewrote our payment architecture in 48 hours just to prove the CTO wrong." I smiled. "I've got an idea. I need you and Timo to come in early tomorrow." She tilted her head. "This about your dad's company?" I didn't answer right away, just nodded slowly. Time to teach them what a backup plan can really do. Here's the part no one in my family knew. While they were busy pretending I was the black sheep, I was building a platform that quietly outpaced half the companies in our region. My software automated logistics and vendor communication for mid-sized manufacturers, the exact kind of service my dad's company had been outsourcing inefficiently for years. We'd pitched them once, back when we were still small. They declined, saying they preferred more established solutions. Translation: I was still the kid with the dusty laptop. But now we were 10 times bigger than the provider they used. Faster, cheaper, safer. And I knew their contract was up for renewal in 3 months. So we moved fast. First, we finalized a deal with their largest competitor. I didn't hide who I was. I sat in that boardroom, looked the new execs in the eye, and said, "I know how they operate. I watched it for 20 years. Let me show you how to do it better." They signed in 2 weeks. Next, I reached out to 3 of their satellite vendors, small logistics shops who always complained about delayed payments and clunky portals. I offered our services with 0 onboarding costs. We'd eat the expense for the first 6 months. They said yes immediately. Then came the final piece. We launched an open-source version of our internal dashboard system, completely free. It wasn't as powerful as our main product, but it was good enough to get companies hooked. And we targeted one market specifically, manufacturers in my dad's sector. By the time my father's company realized what was happening, it was already too late. Their logistics provider bailed, picked us instead. Their vendor network thinned out, moved to our dashboard. Their merger partner began questioning the acquisition, citing digital instability. Internally, the company started hemorrhaging confidence. Stocks slumped. Press started to whisper. And then came the audit. One of our partner firms, a mid-sized regulatory consultancy, conducted a digital infrastructure review for every client in their network. It was routine, standard, but someone tipped them off to take a closer look at my father's company's security protocols. They failed, miserably. Articles started popping up. Headlines like, "Legacy manufacturer struggles to modernize amid tech transition." "Rising star in automation sector poaches key clients from longtime industry player." They never named me, but anyone paying attention could connect the dots. Natalie did. She showed up at my office one afternoon. I was reviewing quarterly projections with Janet when the front desk pinged me. "She's here," the receptionist said. "Let her up," I replied. Janet raised an eyebrow. "This gonna be dramatic?" "Probably." When Natalie walked in, she looked different. No glam, no heels, just jeans and a hoodie. Her makeup was minimal, her eyes tired. She closed the door behind her and stood there for a moment before speaking. "You did this." I didn't deny it. "You couldn't just leave it alone, could you?" she said, voice shaking. "You had to destroy Dad's company." "I didn't destroy anything," I said calmly. "They did that themselves. I just stopped protecting them from the consequences." She sat down across from me and stared at the floor. "He's not sleeping," she said. "Mom barely talks. Everyone's scared." I waited. "I told them you'd come after us," she whispered. "After what I did." I leaned forward slightly. "You think this is about what you did to me? The invoice? The lot?" She looked up. "It's not," I said. "This is about years of silence. Years of being ignored. This is about them choosing you, over and over again, and pretending it was normal. Pretending it didn't hurt." "I didn't ask them to choose me," she snapped. "No, you just enjoyed it." We sat in silence for a long time. Finally, she said, "So what now?" I shrugged. "Now they figure it out. Maybe they adapt. Maybe they collapse. That's not my problem." She stood up to leave, paused at the door, and turned back. "You were always smarter than me," she said quietly. "I never wanted to be better than you," I replied. "I just wanted to be enough." She left without another word. 3 weeks later, the merger fell through. My dad stepped down voluntarily after a shareholder vote of no confidence. They issued a statement thanking him for his visionary leadership and expressing excitement about a new era of innovation. He didn't return my calls. My mom sent me an email with no subject line. It just said, "You got what you wanted. I hope it was worth it." I didn't respond, because it wasn't about what I wanted. It was about what I needed. Closure, accountability, balance. But just when I thought it was all behind me, I got a letter in the mail. Another one. This one wasn't from my parents. It was from my aunt, Aunt Marie. She'd always been the only one who really saw me, even as a kid. She never picked sides. Just watched. Waited. Loved quietly. Her letter was short. "Cole, I know this storm has been brewing a long time. And while I can't pretend I understand every piece of it, I want you to know something. You didn't burn anything down. You just stopped holding up a house that was already collapsing. And sometimes, the only way to rebuild is to clear the wreckage. Love always. Marie." I folded the letter and placed it next to the first one, the one from my mom, in the same drawer. Side by side, past and present. That weekend, I took Dylan's advice and drove out to the coast. Sat on the cliffs, let the wind rip through my jacket, and stared at the waves until the sun dipped below the horizon. No noise. No headlines. No Natalie. No pretending. Just me. For the first time, I wasn't the backup plan. I wasn't waiting for them to see me. I had become someone I was proud of, someone undeniable. And as the last bit of sun disappeared over the edge of the world, I whispered something into the cold air, just for me. I was never too sensitive. I just felt everything they refused to feel. And that was the end of it.
To a framework of how to think about it. And I think that that is such a refreshing thing, because often we're told to be vulnerable and be open, and then you let it all out, and then you're like, oh, well, this is just a mess. I don't know where to put it all. And then, this book allows you to kind of go, okay, well, that makes sense, and this is how I place this. How did you How do you recommend for people to find the time to create rhythms? I know you say you block out the Sunday to be with yourself and spend time walking in nature, trying not to be distracted. For anyone right now who's saying, I recognize from hearing both of you that I must have some trauma, where do I find the time to unpack it? How do I make time for that? And where do I start?
Well, you start with understanding that your cup being full is how you allow yourself to give to other people. You can't give what you don't have. You can't love if you haven't been loved. You don't even know how to begin to do that. So I think it begins with fundamentally understanding that you are worthy enough, you are valuable enough, you matter enough to give yourself the love that you deserve. And that starts by taking out time for yourself. So I have my own rhythm and pattern. I know that if I go 6 days and then on the 7th, by the 7th or 8th, don't give myself a break, that lots of other things give, that I'm not as alert, I'm not as attuned, I'm not as centered, I'm not as focused. So I know that is my limit. I cannot go beyond a certain amount of days. And for me, walking in nature is my solace. It is where I feel that I am one with all, and all being, all creation and, connected. For other people, it may be dancing, it may be music, it may be knitting, it may be whatever it is that brings some kind of rhythmic pattern into your life. Actually, it was Bruce and I were walking on my campus in South Africa, and there were a group of girls dancing literally on the lawn, because Lord knows they love to dance. And Bruce says, oh, that's not just, I said, oh, they're just having fun. And Bruce said, oh, they're not just having fun. They actually are healing themselves, because the rhythmic pattern, that's why when you've been in an argument with someone, or you're in the middle of an argument with somebody, if you just go and take a walk, or you go and turn on some music and you start dancing, if you just have some form of movement, you feel better. That's number one. Number two, one of the most important things, most important takeaways from what happened to you, I believe, is understanding how the brain works. And that diagram that's on page 26 or 27 about the inverted brain being like a triangle. So you see that beginning with the brain stem, that's the lower part of the brain, all the way to the cortex and through the limbic area. You understand that, we're looking at it right there. You understand that when you're upset or in fear or angry or are in an antagonized state, and you're trying to reason with a person, a child, your spouse, your boss, your friend, they literally cannot hear you, because the reasoning part of the brain is in the cortex, and what you're saying is only reaching the brain stem. So whenever somebody is dysregulated, which is what that is, being anxious and fearful and yelling and screaming, the thing to do is to calm yourself first. Then you will be able to help that other person get calm and regulated. That's how